Hey there folks, it's me TheTacticalBrit, and I've been playing Squad since pre-alpha in the summer of 2015, which feels like a very long time ago, and well, I suppose it probably is. The game has effectively been in my playlist or something I've been playing frequently or infrequently for around about 5 years now, which is pretty incredible if you think about it. When I first played this game, and I'll have some early footage of some videos I made like 2 or 3 years ago, there wasn't vehicles. There was, everybody was on foot. You had iron sights, and that was about it. There wasn't even fobs at one point. There was rally points that barely worked. And it's come such a long way, seeing every single implementation of update over the past 5 years has been this super satisfying experience of just seeing something come to life, from a game that looked like a tech demo in early 2015 to a fully functioning modern tactical shooter, one of the best in the market, and whilst I will be talking about criticisms I currently have of Squad in 2020, I highly advocate you get this game. This is a fantastic modern shooter, and it's one of the best presently, in my opinion, on Steam or anywhere else that you could get a game. It's got a dedicated community, a dedicated development core, and the future can only get brighter for Squad. Now, with that being said, there's been some things recently that have been playing on my mind whilst I play Squad, things that bother me and sometimes want to make me outright not play the game anymore, and I wanted to discuss them in this video. Some of it has to do with balancing and factions, some of it has to do with in-game mechanics such as stamina and the death system, and I just wanted to talk about it. As somebody who has played this game from the first iteration to the latest iteration, yeah, of course there were some gaps in between where I just, I was burnt out. I'd played a lot of Squad over 5 years. But to me, there are some critical problems that are plaguing the game right now that certainly need some form of addressing. The first critical flaw for me at the moment has to be the balancing of the game, and I'm not talking about the server-side balancing where admins switch players and whatnot. I'm talking about the critical flaws that exist between the factions, and this is something that's becoming inherently obvious in this game, and it almost appears as though the roadmap that they've released or was partially leaked is trying to address this, but probably won't end up actually doing that. Now, for those of you who are unaware, optics are a huge problem in Squad. There are some teams, like the Americans, which all have 4 times optics, sometimes have even longer range optics, and the vast majority of their players will have an automatic or 3-round burst weapon capable of killing targets at range. Now, the Russians have the same thing, but the optics aren't traditionally good looking, they take up a lot of the screen, they're quite bulky, and they're not, I don't think, as pinpoint accurate as the American ones. The British have great optics as well. The Canadians have great optics, and I've been told that the Australian mod will also have fantastic optics. And then you have this problem, where you've got the Insurgent faction and the Militia faction who have these absolutely terrible optics, and effectively are condemned to using iron sights. I'll be honest with you, in 2020, the vast majority of games I play as an Insurgent or as a Militia-based player, I almost either quit, switch team, or just decide that it's not worth it. And it really isn't, there's no point playing a game when you have one faction of a team who has the ability to dome you from 300-400 meters away, and another faction that's relying on AK-47s which are capable of maybe 100 meters at best, given somebody's a decent shot with an iron sight. Sure, they have emplacements and stuff, but ultimately at the end of the day, you've got these powerhouse factions like the Russians and the Americans who have superior fire capability, superior vehicles, superior weaponry, and superior optics, to the extent that it honestly, in my opinion, is just not worth playing as the Militia or the Insurgents presently, because nothing that they bring to the table is particularly useful. They don't have any quirks that make them a special faction other than, maybe the odd, destructive element, but ultimately, at the end of the day, combat engineers can achieve the same. So really, there's this big divide here. You've got modern factions which seemingly are doing pretty well, and then lesser factions like the Militia and the Insurgents which seemingly just shouldn't exist. One of the bigger problems I'd certainly say with this is that the actual Squad development map introduces the Middle Eastern Alliance. Now, the Middle Eastern Alliance, based on what I've seen and heard and, rough rumors and what I would recommend would happen, is effectively if you took the Militia and the Insurgents and made them a modern military faction like the Iranians or the Iraqis or something of that general variety, and they would have actual military-grade weaponry and the ability to fight back against the Americans or the Russians or any other faction like the British that you introduce. So it's introducing optics and more powerful weaponry, but again, this effectively condemns and almost acknowledges the fact that the Insurgents and the Militias are basically pointless. There's no point having them in the game because they can't do anything better or at a reasonably balanced level. And even within that microcosm of balance, it's safe to say that the Americans are probably the most powerful faction going, based on the number of auto weapons they have, the cleanliness of their optics and the ability to hit things over range, swiftly followed by the British, and then maybe the Russians. Even within the higher factions, it's safe to say that the Russians are a lot less loved in the community because of their optics are bulky, a lot of them are pretty terrible looking, and again, this is all hinging on one major thing, and that's realism. This game tries its best to be as realistic as possible, and I feel that it's sacrificing gameplay in the name of doing so. The reason people enjoy Postscriptum so much, despite these games operating on very similar bases, with very similar engines and game design, is the fact that everybody works on a level playing field in Postscriptum. Everybody is using iron sights except for a sniper or two, and ultimately at the end of the day, the only real balance discrepancy is automatic weapons in that game, and even that seems relatively balanced in comparison to something like Squad. So this seriously needs to be addressed. I feel as though introducing the Middle Eastern Alliance isn't really going to resolve anything. Sure, it's going to introduce a new faction that will probably be, able to repel the Americans and the British and so on and so forth, but at the end of the day, the ultimate problem is the fact that this game hinges itself so much on realism that the game suffers from it. Russian optics are sure bulky in real life, but at the end of the day, if they were less bulky in the game and less clunky in the game, people would use the Russians more effectively. The same applies to the Middle Eastern Alliance. I'm sure they're going to underpower these guys to some degree because nothing could be more powerful than the Americans in this game. For some reason, the design decisions towards this game tend to lean towards the Americans and British quite heavily due to the optics that they have, and even the British has some obscure ones. And I guess that's the big problem for me. I really want to see this balance issue addressed. Either that's toning down the Americans and reducing the number of optics that they have, or buffing the other optics in the game, making sure the Russians don't have these things that look like they take up 90% of your screen and aren't particularly accurate. I think this is a big issue that's plaguing the game. I'm seeing so many people switching teams the second they're put on a faction that they don't like, and a faction that doesn't have the weaponry they enjoy. And I feel as though, again, a lot of this is down to realism. If I'm an American with a UAV, an A-10 gun run, artillery barrages, MBTs, strikers, everything in between, facing an insurgent faction who's got some RPGs and SKS and, a bit of luck, it's a completely one-sided affair. So ultimately, I would like to see a balance change, maybe increasing the ability of the Russians, increasing the ability of the insurgents and militia is massively important, or redesign those factions. Make it that the militia and the insurgents have to face each other and have like an internal conflict over some areas, like some kind of Middle Eastern factionalism. That would make much more sense in my opinion. They just don't fit in the frame of things, in my opinion, with the rest of the game, and when I play as an insurgent, I almost feel like not playing. The next major issue of the game for me right now is the death system. This is something that has changed drastically since I first played this game in 2015, and it has changed off and on throughout the years. The major issue is dead. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with the term, dead refers to the ability for a character to be dead to the extent that they can't be revived. And in a game like Postscriptum, if you suffer an explosion, a high caliber round, or a headshot, your character is not revivable. In Squad, your character is revivable, but has a reduced timer to do so, but it's not exactly anything to rush about. Your character can stay on the ground for at least a good 40 to 60 seconds in some cases, and perhaps even longer in other cases. And this is a huge issue in this game. There is something militantly wrong about how Squad handles this system, because at the end of the day, what I find in Squad is that it doesn't matter if I kill 7 or 8 guys. If there's a 9th member of that squad and he kills me, I may as well have done nothing. Picture this. This is a great example of why this system makes no sense. You're a machine gunner, you're watching a road, and a squad of 9 people runs down the road. You cap 8 of them, they're all down, you've done an amazing job. You have to hit the reload because you expelled loads of your magazine, and then the 9th guy tops you. That's it, you're done. You're good, that's it, you gotta be revived or you gotta wait for something. And then that 9th guy decides to go pick up the medic picks up someone else, they pick up somebody else, and ultimately that entire squad is practically revived within the space of a short minute or two. This is a huge error on this game's behalf, and something that I feel massively needs to change. Especially considering the fact that players should be rewarded for their ability to get stuff like headshots. The number of times where I've headshotted somebody in this game and felt like, that's it, they're down and out for the count, doesn't really mean anything in this game, because at the end of the day, they probably will just get revived. And I find so many of the game battles and gun battles in this game are decided based on who has more players in the area as opposed to the skill of the players within that area. If I get loads of headshots on enemies, I don't want them coming back for at least a good 30 to 40 seconds on a redeploy, giving us time to buffer and perhaps find that redeploy. Whereas in this game, if you kill an enemy, it doesn't really matter because they'll either get revived or they'll come back relatively quickly anyway. There's no, gratification for taking that headshot. There's no reason to do so. You may as well just aim for the chest and improve your accuracy chances at the end of the day. The same applies to explosives and, heavy caliber weapons, especially on stuff like vehicles. There is no benefit to having them in an infantry-based scenario because at the end of the day, if somebody goes down, they will get revived. In my eyes, I much prefer the post-scriptum system of things. If you get killed with a headshot or an explosion, that's it, you're out, You do tend to spawn in a little bit quicker in post-scriptum, but I feel that system works better because it gives people a reward for doing, talented things like securing headshots and good grenade throws and stuff like that. And post-scriptum doesn't punish players if they kill 8 dudes and miss the 9th squad member, that's never the case whatsoever in that game. It's something I feel is hugely important, it's something I really want to change in squad, and if they can introduce a gore element with that naturally because post-scriptum has it, that would be wonderful too. I appreciate these games operate on separate systems, but Squad has had variants of Dead before. I just feel it makes sense. It needs to have it in this game. It just doesn't work right now. So many conflicts in this game are decided by the number of people in a capture zone, not the skill of the people within that capture zone. If I'm outnumbered 2 to 1, that's fine, so long as I have the ability to drop a few headshots and stop them from progressing. That's just simply not the case at the moment. If I kill 1 or 2 dudes and the third guy gets me, may as well have not done anything, to be honest with you. The final system in this game is the stamina system, and this is something that really bothers me. Like, really bothers me in this game. I guess it's because I've been so spoiled by playing games like Hell Let Loose and Postscriptum, where maneuverability is certainly a bit more relaxed, and, you can take stuff like a swig of a canteen and carry on with your day. This is something that really bothers me in Squad because it just feels so limited, and the fact that you're so reliant on vehicles now is a big pain in the arse, in my opinion. So the big problem I find is that your character just runs out of stamina after about 10 seconds. I understand, again, realism. He's got a backpack and loads of gear and loads of ammo. Cool. I'm sure the same applied in World War II. Ultimately, the fact is that realism and stuff like that does not be conducive to actual enjoyable gameplay. And the big issue is the second you stop moving, your character regains stamina, like, instantly. But it doesn't make sense based on the scale of the maps. Most of the maps have these wide open spaces that will require a stamina bar or 2 stamina bars to get across, but then partway through you have to stop running, crouch or lay down or, like, wait, and then your character will get his stamina back, and then you can run again. And it just seems like a very fragmented system. It would just make more sense, in my opinion, to slow down the recharge of stamina, but have more stamina in one given burst. I feel like that's what players want. It makes more sense, the ability to run across a stretch of land and engage in combat, rather than having to run across the land, catch a breath, maybe hopefully jump over a wall and then deal with some combat. Like, it just doesn't make sense. In my opinion, it's a big disconnect. Characters almost feel too slow and too sluggish in this game. It feels like you're just constantly caught out in the open. You don't have the ability to move cover to cover particularly well in Squad because there's just not enough resources to do so. And the final thing I want to address, and this is something that does bother me too, is the player count. I know this is a technicality, I know this is something that is difficult to achieve, especially in the eyes of optimization and networking and making sure the game runs well, but this game really needs 100 players. It really needs it. There are so many squads dedicated to vehicles and helicopters now that it feels like sometimes there are 18 dudes tops per team who are actually engaged in infantry combat at the best of times. Maybe 1 or 2 infantry squads in the play. Everyone else is in some kind of vehicle, helicopter, or something in between, or doing logistics, which of course makes sense. But it feels like since we've introduced so many vehicle elements and we still have the limited player count, we're tearing away from the infantry factor of this game, and most of it's heavily reliant on vehicles, which I personally don't believe should be the case. Vehicles should be a support element, no doubt, and they should be powerful things in their own right, but without extra infantry, it almost kind of feels nonsensical to have so many vehicles in the game, because what are they going to shoot at? I guess that's the big question. And I would really like to see that changed. So folks, that's it. You don't have to agree with my opinion on this game. You know, it's something I played for 5 years, and I'm aware that everybody has radically different opinions on what Squad is and what it should look like in the coming years. You know, some people want it to be PR 2.0, other people want it to be this more modern Battlefield style experience. I understand there are very different opinions, very different factions in the overall community, but ultimately these are just my feelings as somebody who's played it for 5 years, and somebody who feels as though they have a good read on what the game's about and why it should perhaps make some of these changes, but those are just my own opinions. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave a like, tell me what you're interested in about Squad. You know, is there something that's plaguing you at the moment, or is there something that you find particularly challenging? Let me know in the comment section down below and I'll chat with you there. As always folks, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in another video.